Wow, 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 wow. I found two Twitter threads and I want to read these threads to you because I want to pick your brains. I'm curious as to your thoughts about this. Like these Twitter threads that I found were actually about art businesses and pertaining to the manufacturing process that they go through. And this is not like, again, hate to any side, right? Because both sides have their own thoughts and opinions about how this goes down. So we have this tweet by Solid Snake Lover. I'm not going to be able to read this right. I'm just going to call them Solid Snake. And not going to lie, I think artists should think more about the labor conditions of the people they outsource their plastic trinkets and custom manufactured plush to, especially if you're vocal about the ethics and environmental impact of AI art. If you're mass commissioning charms and incredibly labor intensive plushies, have you done any research into worker conditions beyond even a glance over factory tour? To be frank, I find the state of fan merch ghoulish and removed from artisanal work exploitation. I do actually think we need to take a step back into bookmarks, zines, and self-made stuff, lol. I'm also an artist, but some stuff maybe shouldn't be as easy, cheap as it is, like AI art. Maybe this is a convenience that we have no right exploiting if we don't pay for fair labor. I just think this is a very interesting debate that we can go look at both sides for. I don't want this to be a scenario where there's like shit slinging from both sides, you know what I'm saying? And then we have Wormsologist writing, highly recommend your stuff made. Their whole purpose is to find you a manufacturer that uses ethical labor and their prices aren't bad at all. And they write, here's some fabulous pins that I had made through them. Ethical, affordable prices, and they can make your shipment carbon neutral for an additional price. So your stuff made custom products, free templates, guides, community project helped and about. Okay, well, let's see. They have plush toys. Why makers work with us? Secure payments, express globally tracked delivery with recycled parcels, B Corp certified ethical company with local options, and they have 5-star reviews. If you look at Trustpilot, there's only 8 reviews, so take that into account. The reviews seem really positive. There's like two sides to the coin. People who are definitely absolutely agreeing, right? This person writing, I'm so tired of the poison resin art too. And if you guys don't know, like resin art, you can DIY it yourself. It's definitely very toxic to inhale if you start breathing in large quantities of it. If you're working with resin art, always be very, very careful. Work in a ventilated space, wear masks if you do it yourself. But other people, like that's Ashy Pie writing, artists manufacturing 35 acrylic charms and 100 plus toys is not remotely close to the environmental impact of retailers the world over. That is a statistical fact. This argument is couched in bad faith, and I reject it. Weird Takayaki writes, not taking into account the labor put into design versus AI slop is crazy of you. What do you do for a living that makes you so far removed from the evils of capitalism that you can grandstand like this? Just wondering. And another user, Rai Bark Boy writes, I think asking for artists to consider the label conditions and environmental impact is great, but any comparisons to AI art is ... just ridiculous to me. And making the comment that it's ghoulish and shit is asinine and offensive. I definitely will say, right, in agreement with this post, I definitely do think that us as human beings in life and in general should consider how what we are doing, how it impacts things, you know, the environmental impact of the choices that we make in general, just from a day-to-day basis and through art and etc. You know, like when you choose to do things, when you choose to purchase products, you know, are you purchasing like something with more reusable packaging, or are you, you know, utilizing a lot more plastic? Are you bringing to-go bags, reusable bags when you go shopping, or are you just getting the plastic bags they give you? Those are all things taken into account as well. Same thing if you're an artist, considering the impacts that your art has, how you produce it, if there is an option to use more recyclable, sustainable packaging. If you have the means for it, err on that side. There's also a whole other argument too, which then this does get very tricky as well, which is a lot of artists don't make a lot of money. And the thing is, unfortunately, how it is nowadays, the sustainable option is generally always the most expensive option too. And so some people have felt like, while this is a good sentiment to have, you know, trying to keep into mind your environmental impact, whether there are exploitative labor practices in use by some manufacturer process that you choose to go through, the other side of the coin that people have is just that sometimes while artists may want to be good intentioned with the choices they make, the cheaper option is sometimes less environmental friendly. And that's just capitalism doing capitalism things, and why, for some fucking reason, plastic is so goddamn cheap. Sugar, I think this argument is formed for the poster to market themselves as environmental friendly. I think it's like this. It's on the companies to worry about the footprint, not the individual to do everything for 1% emission. That is definitely a thing, that an argument that comes up over and over again every time there's an environmental topic. If you guys did not live in California, right? If you guys do not live in California, California experienced a very, very large drought that happened when I was in middle school. So it was around like 2012, if I remember correctly, was when this massive drought was happening. So the drought was impacting a lot of things. It was impacting farming, especially heavy, because farming is so reliant on water. And this drought was causing a lot of crops to die, etc. Farmers could not plant the amount of plants they need, whatever. It was impacting the amount of food that could be grown due to this massive drought. So there was a lot of marketing to regular day-to-day users, day-to-day individuals like you and me, to try to get us to reduce our water intake, our water usage. They were saying, take cold showers, take showers so that you could take shorter showers, right? Because if it's cold, you're not going to sit in there and cook because it's not comfortable. Take shorter showers, shower for only 1 minute. When it comes to other water usage, make sure you always turn water off, don't leave water running, right? I do agree. Like, as people, we can do our part to try to make more environmental friendly choices. But then there were statistics that were released, and it showed that like the impact that us individuals had on the droughts that was happening in California was less than 1% of our impact. The main issue of the water expenditure in California came from farmers and retail companies and stuff. We're just using a fuck ton of water. Or what? I don't know, right? I don't work for them. But the statistics came out, and the day-to-day users and our 2-minute showers did not put a dent into the drought that was happening. Right. Companies should stop blaming individuals. However, individuals should also try to reduce, reuse, recycle as much as possible. That's what I personally agree with. You and I, again, I do agree. Let's try not to be fucking wasteful if we don't have to, you know, right? Like, we can do our individual part to try to make an impact and to reduce the environmental toll that we take. I think we definitely can. But if you look at numbers for the environmental impact, that is all big corpo that is doing this. It's not us, right? Our 5-minute shower versus 2-minute shower versus 10-minute shower had like no impact on the drought in California. But when this narrative gets pushed out, it is largely a narrative that is used by big corporate and capitalistic societies in general to put the blame on us day-to-day individuals so that big companies can skate under the radar. Because we are so busy policing each other about our water usage. I keep using water because this was something that was very directly impacting of my life when I was living in California. When, again, there was all this narrative about, oh, did you like do a 2-minute shower today? They were giving like little timers too that you can use to like track yourself for a 2-minute timer or for a 2-minute shower just to make sure you were showering like as short as possible to conserve water. Yeah, but then we spent so much effort policing each other, we forgot to talk about the big companies that were fucking pissing away water and having, you know, strong impacts on the drought that was happening in California. I think this is the case for this art situation as well, where, of course, I would hope that artists would, when there is a choice that you can make, please pick the more environmentally conscious one. That would be definitely very great, right? We can all do our part, but this is not the artist's fault that this is happening, in my opinion. Vision Oasis writes, I mean, I think people should think about the labor conditions before they buy their smartphones too. 10 Google searches can power a light bulb for an hour. So then we have another thread, and this was by an artist by the name of Loppy. And I don't know them personally, but I've actually purchased art from them myself. They make some really, really cute bunny stickers. I have some like bunny driving stickers from them. That's for my car. They write, if no one else will say it, I will. Here's a detailed look into manufacturing from an artist's perspective and why OP is fundamentally misguided. OP is reasoning that because an artist sources their products from China, they must be working with sweatshops. While this belief once held truth, the public perception of Chinese factories today is largely based in Western elitism and xenophobia. And by the way, holy fuck, does that make me mad. And this is a whole separate thing. Xenophobia is a real thing, right? And that's like racism towards Chinese people. And it's especially prevalent in the West. The West's relationship with China is very rocky at best. I am very tired of growing up as a Chinese person and always being seen as lesser. And this is a whole separate conversation as well. If you are East Asian and pretty, people always assume you are Korean or Japanese. They never assume you're Chinese because, oh wow, there's no way a Chinese person could be pretty. That is like their implicit bias. Oh, if a product is made in China, people automatically assume it's cheap. It's not. There's cheap shit that's made in the US too. And say what you want, this is very perpetuated through Western politics. They have been spreading this narrative for a very long time, and it's quite annoying as a Chinese person to hear it. And I've been to China 14 times now. I feel like if we are talking about China and the experience of living in China, products in China, I, as a Chinese person who grew up there in my childhood and have been there 14 times, could probably tell you that is not true. I went to China every single year when I was a kid. I go back every year when I can. I lost my passport in Italy, which also had my Chinese visa, so now I can't go back until I get my passport back so that I can reapply for a Chinese visa and then get that. And then I can go. But yeah, my grandma lives in China. I go back to visit her all the time. I go to China all the freaking time. I buy a lot of stuff from China. Half the shit I own is probably from China. And China makes really, really lit shit. And by the way, China is more technologically advanced than the US, and nobody wants to hear it. But it's true. Nobody pays for anything with cash anymore, right? They use WeChat Pay, Alipay, whatever. Any food you want, you can order online and just pick it up right there in the store. Like you can order it through WeChat, through the app. Just buy it, go there in person, pick it up. Public transport's amazing. They have something called Didi, which is like their China's version of Uber, but it's like the superior version of Uber. It is astronomically cheaper by far. Order everything straight through app. Yeah, it's like everything you can do with your phone. It's like extremely technologically advanced now. You go to hot pot shops and little robots deliver you your meat. When you go out to eat, you pay for everything through your phone too. Like even at restaurants, you can WeChat Pay in restaurants. They don't even really accept cash. So because I can't use WeChat Pay when I go to China because I don't have a Chinese bank account because I'm not a Chinese citizen, I have a hard time paying for things in person now because they largely don't even take cash because everything is done through WeChat Pay. Every time I say that, like Western people are always like, no way, like America is technologically superior. Never been to China, bro. So Loppy continues, made in China holds a negative connotation and most people assume that all Chinese products are cheap garbage, but this belief doesn't hold true anymore. As China's industrialization improves, so does its products. A lot of factories take great pride in their work. I have friends who own factories. Well, not them, but their family owns factories, and they, again, take absolute great pride in it. Here's the truth about Made in the X. Depending on a country's laws, a company only has to declare the country in which the product was assembled. This is very true, especially in the US. Even luxury brands that are manufactured in China only to be assembled in, let's say, Italy for that coveted Made in Italy label. Do you guys know that, by the way? Do you guys know that if a label says like Made in Italy, Made in Switzerland, it doesn't have to be made in Italy or made in Switzerland. They can use Chinese parts and just put it together in Italy, but everything was just made in China, actually. I forgot the rules for that. A lot of luxury brands skirt the labeling system, again, because it's not 100% made in said country. Like a lot of luxury bags will say made in Italy, but the parts did not come from Italy. It came from a different country. It was only assembled in Italy, and that's where they can say made in Italy. It's very true. And I forgot the percentages. There is a percentage where it's like, I think after a certain percent, then you can't say that anymore. A majority of factories, even the ones in the US, are nothing more than middlemen for Chinese factories. For example, US plush companies will get their plush patterns cut and sewn in China, then stuffed and finished in the United States, doubling their prices in the process. Again, because if you label something as made in the US, you can mark up the price. So here's a look at manufacturing from an artist's perspective. Let's talk about Alibaba. Alibaba is a directory of manufacturers. It is not a single company producing multiple goods, but rather a marketplace to connect clients with manufacturers who suit their business needs. I would say when it comes to Alibaba, I've used Alibaba, right? Think of it as Fiverr. Fiverr is not one store. You go to Fiverr and you find a whole bunch of different artists and you pick an artist you like. But instead of artists, it's manufacturers. You go to a site, Alibaba, and there's a fuck ton of manufacturers on there and you pick the manufacturer you want. Furthermore, let's use plastic trinkets as an example. OP means acrylic charms, but condescending. Acrylic charms are popular among artists for two reasons: low minimum order quantity and affordable unit pricing. This makes it an accessible product for beginner artists. By the way, speaking about minimum order quantity, MOQ, this is something that these manufacturers site have, which means you need to order this amount to place an order. If a manufacturer company has a MOQ of 50 units, you need to order 50 keychains to work with this company, and they will not take any orders less than 50 units. Keychains typically have a lower MOQ. Depending on what you want to produce, very, very custom things will require an extremely high MOQ. By custom, I mean, again, you want very customized products, very customized shapes, whatever. If you want that level of extreme customization, then the company has a really, really high MOQ because they're going to have to make custom molds, custom stuff to use on the production line for your product specifically, which makes the cost much higher. So if you do makeup, let's say you are a makeup company and you want to get a custom container for your lip gloss, that MOQ is going to be insanely high, like 5,000 to 10,000, because they're going to need to make custom molds to make the container for your lip gloss. And they need to then have an order quantity that's high enough to justify doing that. But for acrylic charms, again, the MOQ is really low because the manufacturing process does not require all of that custom molding, etc. So Loppy writes, let's look at the first listing. The unit price refers to the individual cost of a single product. Example, 60 cents per unit. Minimum order quantity is the amount of products needed for the factory to agree to your order. So 60 cents multiplied by 50 units equals $30. So how can the factory afford this pricing? The more units you order, the less expensive the unit cost will be. but it all has to do with the production lines. Charms are printed on acrylic sheets and then cut with lasers. This means that they can be easily customized and multiple orders can be fit on a single sheet. That means these charms can be produced relatively quickly while producing little waste. A trend you'll notice with a lot of artist goods is that they're made with sublimation. Most of these factories have high quality printers, a sublimation press, and laser cutting machines. Loppy continues, and keep in mind, manufacturing is only the beginning stage of a product's life cycle, so the pricing is fundamentally different. A product's pricing includes every step from the production to arriving on the customer's front door, and that's a discussion for another day. Continuing on, all manufacturers on Alibaba's directories can provide a profile, which provides important info pertaining to their factory, which is verified by Alibaba, as well as certifications. I can only assume OP is talking about Vograce, so let's look at their profile. So this is their profile. It says, here's an image of their place, 200 plus employees, one-stop service, more than 10 inspectors, a whole bunch of certifications titling Vograce, and $10 million output per year. So this was registered July 2010, 5,000 square meters of floor space, the amount of customization. Loopy continues, full disclosure. I've only worked with Vograce a few times. While I was pleased with their service, I work with a different factory entirely. I am not affiliated with them. I am simply using Vograce as an example because it is the most commonly used manufacturer among artists. Here's a look at Vograce's production process, which is pretty much universal for sublimation-based factories. Raw materials, make renderings, printing, glued, cutting, accessory installation, the keychains and stuff, quality inspection, packaging, shipping. David, for me, the biggest problem is that China is by far the largest emitter of greenhouse gases, but I would assume a lot of that is due to the US companies exporting their production to China. Also, it seems like the Chinese government is doing way more than the US government in terms of clean energy policies. I will have to say, again, as a Chinese person, I have a lot of family in China, a lot of friends that are also Chinese. I have a family member, friend of the family, that works in clean energy for Shanghai. That he's like the CEO of a clean energy company in Shanghai, focusing on that. I've toured his facility. I've looked at all of the labor practices, etc. It could be biased because this is a family friend, so obviously he's not going to tell me any fucked up shit, right? A lot of effort is placed into it. I have not toured facilities in the US, so I don't know what the US does. Right? His process is very ethical. Largely, China being a huge emitter of greenhouse gases is also due to the fact that China is literally the country with the world's largest population. So by far, the more people you have, the more greenhouse gas emissions you're going to have in general, just due to more people living there. Then you need to have processes, things that can cater to such a large population, which will emit greenhouse gases. Loppy continues, what defines a sweatshop and why do we associate the term so heavily with China? A sweatshop is a crowded factory with poor working conditions, little to no breaks, and criminally low wages. And yes, when China's Industrial Revolution began, the work conditions were often poor. Loppy continues, however, a lot of positive changes has been made in recent years. Wages have increased, laws have been passed to further protect workers and improve factory conditions, technology has improved, etc. Yes, sweatshops still exist, but that is true of any capitalist society. If you assume that every Chinese factory or product was made using forced labor, I implore you to please educate yourself on China's advancements in industrialization, but also to unpack some of that anti-China rhetoric and Western elitism. This thread is limited by this hell site's word count, but there are dozens of well-written articles out there about China's industrializations and US's biases. The way some of y'all talk is leaning dangerously close to MAGA talking points, and y'all need to unpack that shit. On a closing note, most small artists, including myself, are marginalized people. I'm queer and disabled. Working as an artist allows us to have a chance at making a respectable living. Small businesses are good for the economy, and we should continue supporting them. And that is very interesting. Peachy Poops writes, thanks for writing such an eloquent and informative thread whilst dispelling a lot of xenophobia. As a Chinese-Canadian artist considering making merch in the future, it was incredibly helpful to hear. Froglord writes, incredibly informative, thank you. This was very valuable to know. Anna versus World writes, wait until people find out that there are plenty of sweatshops left in the US as well. Oh, and also, by the way, there was like another mention, and Loppy adds, OP never said China. China accounts for almost 80% of global toy production, which includes custom manufactured plushies and plastic trinkets. OP just said you should research label conditions. Did I not just write an entire thread on how I research my factories? And other people are agreeing as well. Arja writes, this is an excellent thread addressing the labor issues of this argument. Small businesses environmentally aren't the problem either, and have very small environmental impact as opposed to their larger counterparts. Outsourcing small jobs to companies that are set up to handle this work is probably more efficient than if a creator does the work themselves. Doing it themselves potentially creates more environmental waste that they are not likely to properly dispose of. If this person is interested in ethical companies, there are plenty out there to choose from, but not everyone has the ability to meet the needs of the demographic of people who care about this issue. Chimera Bunny writes, quote, made in the USA, end quote, also does not automatically denote it was made ethically the way people assume it does. Prison labor camps are a multi multi-billion industry in America. Low-income neighborhoods are over-policed and then sent to jail where they get paid cents on the hour. Shy Draw says, I thought the original thread was super weird and not gonna comment because why go after indie artists who are just doing what sells to make a living? We'd all love to be able to sell things made from in-country. Less shipping, no customs, if EU, etc. But that's not always viable. Gekkobon says, the original tweet reminds me of the thread on Mu Ding's zoo. It's always advocating for environmental concerns and conditions of a zoo, or in this case a factory, without doing the necessary research to realize a lot of it is based in xenophobia and racism. Daily Blessing says, thank you, I'm tired of all of this made in China stuff is cheap garbage made in sweatshops. Stuff I see every time people talk about fashion, this, and anything related to outsourcing in China. At the end of this, again, my personal thoughts is, of course, right? Us as individuals, you as a small business, always just keep in mind the environmental impact you have and the impact you have in general. If there is a financially reasonable option to go pick the more environmental friendly route, I recommend you choose that. We can all do our part. And again, it just kind of feels like a lot of times people are fighting the wrong battles. Instead of policing big corpo and their environmental impacts, we're policing small businesses that are, again, typically run by one person that's barely making ends meet. I really do feel like we're fighting the wrong battle here. That's just my personal opinion. I'm again curious to see how you guys think about this. What are your thoughts on this scenario? Always love to hear it.